when someone creates a show, they usually want to keep the viewer's interest at peak, and they usually do this through a strong conflict that keeps us wanting to know how it possibly gets resolved. So when creating a character like a Gary Sue or a Mary Sue, it should technically destroy the tension of conflict and make the viewer less likely to continue watching said show. Yet, some shows use an overpowered character as the crux or the point of the show itself. And no, I'm not talking about characters that have stupid plot armor, so this video will not be comparing Freddy Fazbear and Mario Judah from hit show Dragon Bleach Shippuden, but rather characters like One Punch Man, Saiki K, and Mob Psycho, who really try to emphasize the weirdness of having an overpowered character in mostly a normal world or where powers are regular. So, just a heads up, this video will contain spoilers for One Punch Man, Saiki K, and Mob Psycho. Manga will be excluded from this just because I haven't read the One Punch Man or Mob Psycho manga. I want to see which show really does the whole trope of having an overpowered character and a relatively regular world best. So, to start us off, there's Saitama. He's really popular amongst most anime viewers. One Punch Man, the anime, aired in 2015, and the first season, key emphasis on the first season, received widely positive reviews. And his whole, power thing is, he does a one punch and he defeats almost anybody. And next, my personal favorite is Saiki K from the Disastrous Life of Saiki K. Having Saiki in this conversation is kind of weird because his whole show is just a genuine comedy. I know One Punch Man and Mob Psycho are both also relatively comedic, but they aren't true comedies, whereas Saiki K's whole thing is it's just a straight up comedy. So it's a bit it's a stronger show just in the sense that it doesn't have to worry about the same things that Mob Psycho and One Punch Man have to worry about, but I'll get into more detail about that later. And the main reason I have Saiki in here at all is because his character is very similar to Mob Psycho and Saitama. And I know I keep saying Mob Psycho. I know his name's not actually Mob Psycho. It's Mob, but I like to say, I'm just saying Mob Psycho for now. And anyway, lastly, we got Mob from Mob Psycho 100. And he's also a psychic similar to Saiki K. And he's just really strong compared to the other psychics in the world. So these shows have a lot of similarities other than the fact that their main characters are overpowered. One of the biggest ones being that they all lean heavily into comedic factors. They usually have characters that are funny. Saiki K is obviously just straight up a comedy. One Punch Man Season 1 uses its animation heavily in the comedic side of things by using the really manga-esque animation to portray funny emotions onto Saitama. And Mob Psycho's got its hilarious cast of the Body Improvement Club and Reagan, Arataka, and Dimple. All these characters work wonderfully with Mob's more straightforward character and really bring the best out of the show through comedy. And so all of these do have comedy because obviously having that overpowered character hang out with these regular people or not as powerful people adds a great layer of comedy and comedic timing, and it's hilarious. And obviously the one that does the comedy the best is Saiki K. But in fairness, I'd probably say One Punch Man between Mob and One Punch Man. I think One Punch Man, at least the first season, is funnier than Mob Psycho. Overall, I think Mob Psycho is hilarious, though. And I really don't think comedy is the best way to rate which one's better, but if I'm going to have to give one crown for the funniest, it has to be Saiki K, because Saiki K in general, I think, is just one of the funniest shows out there. Another huge similarity is how they kind of emphasize not necessarily conflict, but a form of tension. They use is a lot of these characters don't have their powers widely known. For example, Saitama is like he hangs out with powerful heroes because he's powerful, and so the Hero Association always miscredits his powerful feats. So the public doesn't know that he's actually just like One Punch Man. He can basically be anything kind of deal. And then with Mob, he's kind of socially awkward and he's afraid of his powers just because of like the emotional ties to it and his misuse of it earlier on. So he hides his powers and tries not to use them. And then Saiki K, on the other hand, outright just doesn't want to be found out, and that is the main source of conflict within Saiki K. Is how will he get out of these really stupid, ridiculous situations without using his powers. As previously mentioned, conflict has to be found in very different ways than the average shonen or TV show in general when using overpowered characters, because obviously when you got an overpowered character, generic conflicts tend to be easily solved. So Saiki K has the most straightforward and easy way to establish conflict because he's very antisocial and he doesn't want his powers to be known to the world. So he, tries hiding the powers, and that is where the conflict starts, and the episodes basically begin to write themselves. And I mean this in a positive way. I think the idea that they have with Saiki K is hilarious, and it's just a really funny show in general. And they also make like the more serious conflicts done well because he has to like kind of burden this by himself with like the help of only like a few select individuals. Obviously, the like major conflicts aren't anything to like write home about, but they definitely like make it fun and interesting with like the whole volcanic explosion, and they use kind of like I don't want to say plot twists because they're not necessarily plot twists, but they drop lore in certain ways, like, oh, why has Christmas happened like twice now? It's because he's in a time loop and he's trying to save the world from like this explosion. I think this form of like very mild but serious conflict adds to the funniness of the show while also making the viewer kind of understand that there's something greater than just the funny one-note episodes. The plot, so at the end of the day, the plot isn't groundbreaking, but it's fun. Mob Psycho, on the other hand, is a much more serious with its conflict, and the whole point is like Mob staying true to himself with his powers, even though the world around him changes and becomes harsh. And him moving out of his comfort zone allows him to grow as a character, understand his powers, and make more friends. And Mob Psycho's character-driven conflict allows for it to be genuinely built pretty heavy conflict. Each different experience for fighting, for example, his fight with Terutsuki and the most intense fight with Suzuki, add to this internal conflict and show his character develop as a whole. It helps the viewer like stay on edge and want to know what happens next, and it's primarily because Mob is he's a character that changes so much as the show goes on, and that's really where I feel like the conflict peaks with this show. While Saiki did not need a powerful conflict and Mob used its conflict masterfully, this is where One Punch Man really kind of fails. Conflict in One Punch Man is built through seeing your favorite characters get beat over and over again, and they do this by a pretty smart measure. They usually like put characters in this like really funny situations, and you tend to like grow a love for them because of how funny they are, but then you see them get beat down by a bad guy, and the tension gets built up even though you know Saitama's going to come and save them in the end. That's why my favorite arc with One Punch Man is the Sea King arc. The heroes lose in an awful fight You've got Moomin Rider, you've got Genos. They're all like being beat the crap out of. There's a crowd of civilians right there, which increases the tension. There's kids. It really works amazingly. And then the rain and then the music, it adds a very like intense feeling to it. And it's wonderful. And then when One Punch Man comes in and he punches the crap out of Sea King, it doesn't end the conflict right there. Instead, it like One Punch Man beating Sea King in one punch discredits every other hero that was struggling to beat Sea King. So it introduces like some sort of higher level of conflict that comes with this type of show. Doesn't matter what people do when someone that is much greater than them is capable of doing it better. And I think One Punch Man addresses this by suggesting that it's really the thought of what people are willing to sacrifice in order to achieve a goal that matters. And it's not just One Punch Man. One Punch Man, I think, handled this kind of story well. And in comparison, like if you look at Naruto or a show similar to that, a lot of the minor characters are like ants that are useless against these gods, right? So like a lot of the characters that you like grow to love in these first few seasons are just treated like useless garbage when you compare them to like Sasuke or Naruto and like the Great Ninja War and whatever. And it really, the show kind of falls off and it loses the charm that it has in the beginning. But One Punch Man, I really feel, does it well. And Mob Psycho also tackles this issue, but rather than say that everyone, no matter how powerful, is not special, he thinks that, yeah, so the whole point of Mob Psycho is that no one is inherently special. And I think Psycho does it better than One Punch Man just because they build up to it. They like make Mob like they ground him so much with all these other characters. They use Reagan and it really works. I mean, One Punch Man also works with the whole concept, but I think Mob Psycho just does it better because it's not as one-noted with One Punch Man where it's just the Sea King arc. Mob Psycho really like does it for the whole show, and it's a very thematic thing. So I'm just gonna straight away say this. I think One Punch Man is the weakest out of the three. Although season 1 is a lot of fun, the whole sense of tension just ends with the Boros fight. The fight is amazingly exciting, and it almost feels like Saitama has finally reached the goal of fighting someone that is at least a fraction of his strength. My other issue with the show is that Saitama is a pretty stale character who gets sidelined because he's just not as fun as the other characters. So I think the trope works, but not enough for it to be better than either Saiki K or... So now that Saitama's out of the conversation, it's between Saiki K and Mob, and of course the winner has to be Takahashi. Takahashi is such a fantastically well-written, ridiculously overpowered character. The use of green hair as in reference to the mysterious broccoli in Mob Psycho through the use of his inter-universal expert powers is absolutely fantastic. His ability to understand that he's in fact a character and break the fourth wall while also maintaining the facade that he's in fact not powerful is absolutely fantastically well written. Yahoo! Oh, okay. It looks like that all right, I'm gonna stop. So I think between Mob and Saiki K, I think Saiki K, although he is well written with his godlike powers, allowing him to do stupid things like explain anime tropes, time travel, and create the most outlandish episodes, I think the more meaningful character exploration that Mob Psycho 100 does with Shigekio, is that his name? Or is that Shingeki no Kyojin Titan? Whatever, it's fine. The trope is a lot better. It's just used a lot more meaningfully. The way the power spikes and how he uses the power defines him as a character is very well written with this kind of like overpowered styled power. And the show is just heavy at times, and it's thematically well done. But it can also be hilarious. So I really think Mob Psycho is the best way they handle the trope without making it just 100% a joke like Saiki K does. And that is my verdict. Mob Psycho is the best OP main character.